life. Maybe it's because I'm in the music industry and you find interesting people get together, those creatives. They've got deep and interesting conversations. That's the reason why we get them to sit down so that we can have interviews with some of these interesting people, which this morning would be Helmut Meijer. Hello, Helmut. How are you doing?
Janine, well in yourself.
Lekker, very,
You
very,
make me
very
rise up
great.
very early.
Because this is what I want to know now. I know very few artists that are actually morning people. Are you one of them or not?
Oh, the morning depends on the night before. I like last night. I literally worked till almost midnight, and those schedules are random. So this was a short night, but I'm a morning person actually. Yeah.
Okay, I remember always with Louis Brits, can't go sleep early. So we'll work till what 3 in the morning, but you don't
Yeah.
speak to him before 10 in the morning because you will go and get no coherent answer of anything. Doesn't matter what you ask him, and copious amounts of coffee,
Oh yeah, he
obviously.
doesn't. Yeah.
Listen, how long have you been in the music industry?
Janine, I stumbled into the music industry when I was at varsity and played for how did it go? I played for the church band. And 3 years of that landed me an invitation to do a postgraduate in music. And literally for my first year in music, now I'm not going to say the date because then I give away my age, but it was in the early 2000s. I started studying my postgrad in music and started a record label, as you do. And that was kind of the beginning of a very perilous and fascinating journey. Yeah.
Record label, as in started to produce and started working with other people, because that's an interesting thing. It's a responsibility when people come to you and say, "Make my music pretty."
Yeah. And you see, when you're young, you don't think of it that way. You just think of an opportunity, and this looks like fun. So a friend of mine and myself, a record label is a strong term, shall we say, but I had access to the recording studios at the conservatorium here in Stellenbosch, and they basically gave me carte blanche and said, whatever you want to do, you can do, as long as after a period of 6 months, you can teach a course on music production. So basically I said, well, let's find people to record. And we stumbled on a band called DNA Strings. Some people may have heard
What?
them. They're also not together anymore. Yeah, and we produced the first album for DNS Strings, and that's how Merchant Records was born, which later became Merchant Music, which was Louis' company. Louis took it over from us. So yeah, but I was literally the first year in my masters when we when we started Merchant Records. So a bit of
Yeah.
backstory that people that
The thing
yeah.
is, you start creating music, but there's such a lot of music out there. And then you have to try and find something unique. Because you can be a producer that produces the stuff that sounds like everybody else, and the artist wants to be unique as well. So this is not an easy thing to be a producer.
No, and I'm happy we're on Radio Pulpit because now I can maybe be little bit more honest. Um, in the South African context, you find I don't maybe it's not unique to South Africa, but you find that you're either an artist who wants to sound like somebody else and who wants to sound like maybe most people, and there are certain producers who does that or certain producers do that. I'm not one of them. I've never became commercial in. I had a certain style, a certain fingerprint. I think I was very much influenced by film music, cinematic music. So the type of people that contact me to record their music kind of like that idea. I'm not. So I'm not in the Wors machine. I mean that respectfully, but this is the conundrum, the tension that you have to hold in music production. You either want to sound like the rest, or you want to do something that's really you. And there are different producers for dreams, different
Yeah.
dreams.
So it's a great opportunity to see this thing that God's mercies on you every morning. This fact that people come to you, but the artist that presents themselves before you, they differ like the sun and the moon. You've got so many, because God
Oh
puts
yeah.
in each one of them something unique as well, and it's your job to get that thing, to bring it out, and to make it the best that you can be. Have you? Have you? Does it give you a kick when someone arrives before you and you're thinking, I've never heard this before? Does that even happen often?
It does happen occasionally. I have to say, yeah, I don't want to use the word older because now I'm going to use that a lot. But I have a kind of established way that people find me. People don't rock up here that's completely fly off the wall. That rarely happens. But in the beginning, when I was a student and we ran a record label and we ran a studio, all sorts of characters would rock up, from blues guitarists to people literally walking into the studios off the street who said, hey, I can play a djembe, can we record? So all sorts of characters picked up. These days, it is more individuals fed through the network. There is an established network of people that say, hey, I think Helmut may be the guy, etc., etc. But truth be told, very, very interesting. I very often say to people, if you're a music producer, you're more of a psychologist than you're than you're a music producer, because it is at the end of the day, you produce people, not music. You work with their art, you work with their dreams. It's an acquired skill. Don't think you're born with that, but you learn that very quickly.
Yeah, I'm also thinking you need to be well versed in any kind of style so that any kind of person you can work with, any kind of whoever the artist is that pitches before you. And you can't get stagnant. You can't just use whatever you used in the past, because otherwise you will have a reputation for not being creative. And you need to have a reputation of being new and creative, not true?
Absolutely. In fact, there is a saying, use music in your after your 40s. I know this is a weird concept, but they say the problem of a music producer past their 40s is their own preferences becomes too strong. You see, if you're young, you're flexible and you're malleable. You kind of adapt to the times that are changing and the sounds that are changing and whatever is current. But it becomes all the more difficult because the inertia to stay, in the space that you like becomes the problem. So for me, it was an intentional thing to say, look, I'm fascinated by music. I'm fascinated by sound. And I have to place my preferences to the side. Otherwise, you would end up doing only the same things. For that reason, I also don't really believe in studios, because it feels to me if you work from the same space day and night, you tend to do the same thing in that space. So I have adopted a lifestyle where I travel with my recording equipment. I try to record people in their homes or in weird spaces or whatever. And that kind of keeps not only the music alive, but it keeps the idea of what you're doing alive. So, different strokes for different folks, but for me, keeping an intentionality, to vary the spaces, that works for me.
Yeah, it's cardinal. Okay, let's get to you being this Hebrew scholar and your fascination with Israel. Where did that happen? How did it happen?
So I was one of the handful of people that in the previous recession, when was it, 2008, was advised by one of my friends to say, hey, pack up your shop and move to London. And which I did. I prayed, and there was a number of signs that lined up as it goes. And I remember it was in April 2008, landed in England, just at the end of the winter. It was a Thursday, and the Friday night, my friends invited me to a Shabbat meal, which is the family meal that the Jewish peoples do on Friday nights, or those who follow some Jewish customs. And I remember sitting in that meal. It was beautiful. They did all sorts of interesting rituals. But I remember sitting there and go, if any of this is true, I'm offended that nobody's ever told me about this. So I had my moment of I couldn't really distinguish whether I was offended or shocked or in admiration of this. But anyway, fast forward 4 weeks down the line, after three more of these Friday night meals, I had a very interesting experience the night. My friend was pouring over the wine, which is part of the Shabbat custom on a Friday night. And something in me went, whoa, I can't place my finger on it, but something in me shifted. And literally that next morning, I went to the computer and I started. And it was just all of these tabs opening up, and I realized I was on a muddy, slippery slope. And that was the beginning of me studying biblical Hebrew. It was in May 2008. And literally 1 year after immigrating to England, quote unquote, I moved back to South Africa. And in retrospect, I realized that was a year that the Father literally placed me in England to begin the study of the Hebrew Bible. And yeah, now it's 15 years down the line. I have an online community that I help to teach biblical Hebrew. And yeah, it's a whole jolly affair, but
whole jolly
it is a strange, I did not go looking for this, let me put it that way.
Okay, so now you start, because to me, it's a daunting thought. Hebrew is complicated, and it's got so many layers, and every word is so full and rich. To even start out, to me, thought is a huge thought. So you did. When you started out, I'm not talking about now, 15 years later, was it something that to you was one step that led to the next step, and that's how you got where you are today? Or did you just jump in and leave everything else so that you could focus on this?
So I think studying any new language, there is a pivotal starting point, right? Let's just be real about it. If you start studying Spanish or Portuguese, you need to start somewhere. Now, the thing with Hebrew is you're dealing with another alphabet that gets written from right to left, not from left to right. So it's different symbols. And then, you soon discover that the alphabet that the modern Israeli or that modern Israel uses is even different from the one that was used to translate or used to write the source text of the Bible. So you have two scripts. You have a picture script that lasted up to about, and from there, when the Jews returned from Babylon, there was another script called the Aramaic flame script or the Babylonian flame script. And that is the script that we see these days when you think of Hebrew. When you go to Israel and all those little signs and letters, that is the modern script. So in my first year, I was confronted with a different alphabet, and that took up most of my first year. It's just coming to terms with a different script and realizing that in contrast with our Greco-Roman or our Latin-based alphabet, where the letter A and B and C has no inherent meaning, it's just a placeholder. In Hebrew, every letter of the alphabet has inherent meaning above and beyond the fact that it has a sound and a word. So, for example, the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet is called the Aleph. All right? As you would say A in the Latin alphabet, you say Aleph in Hebrew. Now, Aleph is actually literally an ox.
What?
So there's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. Every letter has one concrete aspect that relates to the nomadic people. For example, an Aleph is the first letter. The next letter is a Beit. So it would be Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samech, Ayin, Pei, Tadi, Kuf, Resh, Shin, Taf. Literally all of those 22 letters are physical things. And then if you start combining these letters and start making words, you get a concept like, for example, Aleph, first letter, Beit, second letter. When you put these two together, it forms the letter Aleph, Beit, but that would be the word Av, and that's the word for a father. And they would see it, the father is the strength or the ox of the household. So literally you have these rudimentary words being formed out of the meaning of the letters of the alphabet. Fascinating. So I took a full year just grappling with the alphabet and dug into the semantics and the language rules. And it's a whole different ball game. But I mean, just to come to terms with there's an alphabet that gives us insight into a people group, into their language, into their culture. It's fascinating.
Because that's another thing. The culture. Our time is done. I'm so irritated, really. Because because the culture around it is now a next level that adds to the richness even of the language. So that must have been another 20 years of the 15 years.
Yeah, maybe I can just comment on that, Janine. The Hebrew culture, because it's a nomadic people, there's one or two things that one needs to know. In the ancient world, people were not stationary. A dwelling place meant a tent, not a house like we put up permanent structures and we invest and we buy cars and all these concrete materialistic things. For the lived in a tent, you had livestock as your possessions that indicated your religion or your wealth. You had family as your most prized possessions. You were faced with drought, you were faced with famine, you were faced with looking for graceland all the time, searching for water. So the entire nomadic culture of the Hebrew people is connected to a very down-to-earth view of everything. And when you read the Bible is saturated with that cultural understanding. I mean, even the way that God presents himself to the Hebrew people is in their terms. It's concrete, it's basic, it's earthly, if I may. Earthy is that not earthy, earthy.
Listen, Helmut, so, our time is done. I need to refer people so that they can follow you, because you do a lot of these teachings. Besides the fact that you're going to be on a Monday on Radio Pulpit, tell them where they need to go to get all of this information if they want to miss out on nothing.
Yeah. Okay, you want to okay.
Yes.
We have a YouTube channel called Biblical Hebrew Perspectives, and the handle is at Biblical Hebrew Perspectives. And follow the channel. We do a language leg and fascinating topics that we discuss, everything related to the Bible and ancient Hebrew.